Well, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan Hughes. Today we're talking about these brand new recipes that commemorate the 25th anniversary of the Nik Collection, right? 25 years. That's crazy. Basically, we're not going to get into the history of Nik software, but it's a really interesting company to think about. It started in the 90s by Niels Kokomor. I didn't join the company until 2009, so the company was practically a sort of a teenager at the time. And then when I was doing webinars for Nik software, we grew immensely. We had all sorts of wonderful pieces of software coming out. And the Color Efex Pro software that we're going to be using today has 5 great new recipes that are specific to wildlife photography. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And I also want to point out that you don't have to use these recipes exclusively for wildlife images. They work in other images, of course. The recipes and the images that I'm using today are wildlife images. But we're going to talk about how you can augment the recipe, maybe a thought process as to how to approach recipes, saving your own recipes using this software in a way that's going to fit your aesthetic, both for wildlife photography as well as any other kind of photography. And hopefully we'll get a lot out of it. These are the things we're going to cover. So we're going to look at some examples of these recipes. I'm going to walk you through what the filters are doing to each one of these recipes. We're going to customize our own, create our own recipes, and then I want to show you how to save your own recipes. So as you develop your own looks and adjustments that you're interested in, you will be able to utilize the software to the nth degree. So we're going to be launching the software from Photolab as well as from Photoshop, because I want to show you a trick using some layers and layer masks to further enhance what you could potentially do with the Color Efex software in Photolab. I'm going to recommend that you do make adjustments to your images before you go into the Nik Collection. There's a number of different thought processes in this regard. We're not talking about that stuff today, unfortunately. That would take us another 2 hours. So what we're going to do is take this finely imaged bird photograph into Color Efex Pro 4, and we're going to take a look at these presets. So to do that from Photolab, what you would first do is move into the lower right corner of the interface where it says Nik Collection. Simply click that Nik Collection button. Your plugin selector is going to pop up on your interface, and you simply click on Color Efex Pro 4. When you click on Color Efex Pro 4, a couple things are going to happen. The raw file in Photolab is going to be duplicated into, by default anyways, a TIFF file. And then from there, Color Efex Pro 4 should open, and we're going to have our interface. Now, we're in Color Efex Pro 4, and 2 things are happening that I want to change right off the bat. And I never turn off these pop-ups for the Nik plugins because I do these webinars all of the time. But once you know what the pop-ups, these warnings say, you're able to turn these off by clicking the Do Not Show Again button in the lower left corner of that particular sort of warning or pop-up. So what this is telling us is that we have a non-destructive process, or at least we can work in a non-destructive process by clicking on the checkbox in the lower right corner of our Color Efex Pro 4 software. So that's what this is letting us know. I'm just going to click the OK button. I'm going to tap F on my keyboard. And what the F key does as a shortcut is it simply fills your screen with the Nik plugin that you're currently in. So this is nice because I just tap F. It goes from that partial screen view to the full screen view. If we wanted to work in that non-destructive process, you would click on this little checkbox in the lower right corner. I'm not going to worry about that for this webinar because we're not going to need to make edits afterwards, but I just wanted to show you considering that button popped up or the warning popped up. What we're going to do is start to investigate recipes, where to find them, what they mean, how to use them, and so on. So we will talk a little bit more about different tools within the interface, but for now, if you follow me to the left side of the interface here, we're in the filter library, which is where you access the 55 individual filters within Color Efex Pro. If we wanted to use a recipe, we wouldn't just choose from an individual filter. That's what these are in the filter library. What we would do is move into the recipes section. So if you follow my cursor into the lower left corner, I click on recipes, the interface changes a little bit, and this is how we can access all of our recipes and then our different sort of delineations of our recipes. we're going to click on the 25th anniversary. This is 15 brand new recipes that are built into the newest version of the Nik Collection 3.3, and they're fantastic, easy to use. And what I like about them is they have a lot of different potential, right? These are called classic portrait recipes, and all of these top ones here are kind of designed for using them on portraits, right? Adjusting images that are of people, of portraits. This could probably be considered a portrait, and I bet you we could use some of these recipes. There is another webinar coming up on the 14th where we're going to sort of focus on those portrait recipes as well. So if you have some time, come on back. I'd love to chat with you about those recipes and then talk about how we can augment them for your potential use. All right. What I did here in the recipe section, I just scrolled all the way down to the bottom, and this is where we're going to find our wonderful 5 recipes that are made for wildlife or designed for wildlife. So let's go ahead and just click on them and see what they do. As I click on the first wildlife, cool evening recipe, we get another pop-up, another warning, and this is just telling us that by adding this recipe, it's going to replace any filters that are currently being used on the right side of the interface. So it's just going to throw out that stuff, and we're going to get our new set of filters applied. So I'm going to click yes. You'll see on the right side, now we have Pro Contrast, Glamour Glow, Darken, Lighten, Center, and Duplex. And we are going to use some of these other recipes for now, but note that if you want to make adjustments to any of these recipes or filters within the recipes, you can do that by clicking on the particular filter. So let's say with Duplex, and making adjustments to them. And we'll talk about what that means and how to sort of approach those kinds of things. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and click on every one of these different recipes, walk through the different filters that they're using, just to kind of give you an idea. So that cool evening recipe that we clicked on, it cools the image down. It adds a kind of glow using the Duplex filter. What I just clicked on was the wildlife fur details recipe. So I'm going to click yes. And I just want to kind of describe maybe the thought process of using these 2 different recipes. Again, we're going to click on all of them, but the cool evening recipe that we used is this sort of highly transformative look that takes our kind of linear or our digital, relatively flat looking image. It's beautifully shot, but relatively flat image, and it converts it. It makes it cool. It cools the tones. It darkens the image, and so on. And the cool evening recipe might be used as a highly transformative sort of thing, whereas the fur details, which is comprised of the detail extractor filter and the tonal contrast filter, you could apply this recipe globally, as what we're doing right now, right? And it's going to enhance the entire image. But the design thought process for this particular filter, or sorry, recipe, is primarily to be used selectively. So we would only put the detail extractor and tonal contrast filter right on the bird, and we would remove it from the rest of the image. And therefore, what we're going to get is more of a direction towards the fur or the details in the bird that we really want to bring out, right? Whether it's the feathers, or the breast, or the eye, or the beak, or whatever, you can apply this particular recipe selectively using control points to basically just put the effect in where you want it to be. We're going to come back to this filter, the tonal contrast detail extractor. I'm going to go more in depth as to how to control these control points with this particular recipe. For now, I'm going to delete this control point, and we're going to just take a look at the other recipes really quickly. So know that some of the recipes you probably would apply to the entire image, and then some of the other recipes maybe you would use just in a particular part of the photograph to call out the subject or to direct the viewer's attention towards something or away from something. The wildlife on the dark side recipe is comprised of low key, glamour glow, darken, lighten, center, right? 3 really nice filters that can do all sorts of different things. And in this case, we're getting an overall kind of darker toned image, and it kind of gives us this smooth, dark tone overall. Really quite nice. I love what it's doing. And in fact, I think what we're going to do is run with this recipe. We'll just remove it from the bird. Before we do that, let's click on Soft and Dreamy. I'm going to go ahead and replace that on the dark side with Soft and Dreamy. You can see that one has Glamour Glow, Classic Soft Focus, and Pro Contrast. And then our sunny day recipe has skylight, pastel, and white neutralizer. Now, what's interesting about these groupings of filters is that in a lot of situations, we're not going to think to combine skylight with pastel and white neutralizer. But it's a great tool and combination of tools, especially when you start to go in and make some adjustments, let's say to pastel. Let's say instead of using method number 2, we use method number 1. We increase the diffusion, increase the saturation, and now we have a very different look to our sunny day recipe, even though all we did was change the method and adjust the contrast or the saturation a little bit in diffusion. In fact, we've clicked on sunny day. Let's just look at the before and after. By clicking the compare button that's in the top sort of left quadrant of the interface here, if you press and hold compare, you'll see the original image, which initially when we opened it, I thought maybe looked a little bit flat, but it's a nice photograph overall. By applying this recipe, it really brightens up and gives us a sense of a summer day or a really bright exposure and a warm toned image. And it's completely transformed. All we did was click on a recipe and then make a couple little adjustments to the pastel filter. So it's quite lovely because we can do this consistently. We can click on sunny day, make these little adjustments, and fine tune, let's say, a series of images, 5, 10, 20, however many photographs, and we can get a similar aesthetic and feel overall without having to do a ton of work, right? In fact, let's go ahead and do a ton of work to highly transform this image. And what I want to do is kind of direct your eye as the viewer. I want to direct your attention towards the bird. I want you to note the environment. It is important, and the tones within the environment will help us to tell that story of this bird on a limb. We're going to click on the dark side recipe though. I'm going to click yes, and let's really get into this. So first things first, this filter or this recipe is comprised of low key, glamour glow, and darken light and center. For now, I'm going to actually hide the recipes. So moving into the upper left corner, I'm going to go ahead and click on this button, which is going to hide the adjustment panel. We're going to get a little bit more real estate for our image so that we can see it a little bit better. And let's talk about how to customize these recipes. So I'm going to move into the low key filter, and we could make adjustments to the low key, but I kind of like what's happening for the most part overall. I just don't want the low key filter applied on our bird, right? And I know I don't want that because I want your attention to be directed towards the bird. And this low key filter is purposefully darkening the entire image to give us, a more low key image, a darker overall photograph. The Glamour Glow filter, if we were to run through these, the Glamour Glow filter here actually sort of gives us this soft glowing effect. We'll emphasize that later. And then the Darken Light and Center filter, this is a good trick for sort of relighting the image. That is, darkening the border and lightening the center of the image. And if I toggle this on and off, you'll see without Darken Light and Center, now the bird is not necessarily the brightest thing. It definitely sticks out in the image because of the color contrast between the bird's body and the yellow-green of the background. But if we turn on Darken Light and Center, watch how your attention sort of is brought right into the middle of the image, right? And it's almost like a sleight of eye trick. It's a lovely filter. We'll tackle that one in a couple minutes. For now, let's go back to low key. And I love low key in this case. I just don't want it on the bird. And to do that, to remove it from a particular area or object in an image, whether it's low key or any filter within the Nik Color Efex Pro software, you use control points. So everything that we've done so far, we've basically applied globally. We've put it on the entire image. These 2 points, plus and minus control points, allow us to put our filter in a particular area or take it out from a particular area. We want to remove it from the bird. So we're going to take a minus control point here, and we're going to place that minus control point right on the bird's head. And 2 things will happen instantly. First of all, the control point is going to go in and make a selection of the bird, and because this is a minus control point, it's going to remove the low key filter. Right, so it's just removing the low key filter from wherever we've placed the point. Now, one of the things that you would notice when you start using these, if you don't use them already, is that depending upon where you place the control point, on the exact tone and color that you place the control point, you are going to get a, in this case, removal of the filtered effect. If I take the control point and I start to slide it over the eye or the face of the bird, right, then maybe it's over the black area of the bird's right before the beak here, what we're going to get is more detail, right? Basically, we're removing that low-key effect from that area, and as I drag the low-key or the minus control point over the bird's feathers here, we're able to basically remove it from that part of the bird, right? And one thing that I want you to note is that you might need to use several minus control points in small areas like this to really get the effect that you want, right? And what's happening is the control point is doing a good job to make a selection of the object that you've placed the point on. But what these control points are going to do is they're going to look for similar tones, colors, and textures. And because the bird is multi-toned and multicolored, in this case, basically black and this beautiful blue cyan color, we're going to need to use multiple control points. On some objects, like if we wanted to put a plus control point on this leaf here, which really shouldn't do much, if anything, the control point's going to do a good job to make a selection of the entire object, right? And that's because it's recognizing the edge of these objects, it's recognizing the tone, color, and texture, and it can see this stuff. But sometimes the control points are a little bit more challenged. And so you need to use more control points, or possibly you need to change the area of influence. And there's plenty more webinars and presentations, videos that are on the DxO Nik Software YouTube channel that explain exactly how these points work. I'll gladly answer more questions. We could talk for 40 minutes about them. For now, what we're going to do is just use these minus control points, place them on the bird to get rid of the low key effect, and then we're going to make sure that we're getting the effect that we want. To do that, there's 3 different ways to do that, but we're going to go ahead and just turn this on and off. So we're going to use the checkbox that's to the left of the low key filter. We'll turn it on and off, and we can see exactly where the filter is being applied. So now I know my low key effect is being applied to most of the image, just not the bird. I'm happy, so we can move on to the Glamour Glow filter, right? And so this is one way of really controlling how these filters are going to work. You make adjustments globally, and or you also add and remove the filter effect using control points. So we've done this with a low key filter. I'm going to go into the Glamour Glow filter. I'm going to apply that just to see what it's doing. It's a pretty subtle kind of glowing effect. I like it. I do actually want to remove it from those same areas on the bird. So rather than taking fresh minus control points, right, rather than using these points and me having to place them again, I'll show you how to copy control points from one filter to another. Now here's the thing, like this goes, you can go as in-depth as you'd like with these kinds of techniques. And I just want to make sure that I've shown you these things as we're going, because this is how you can control to the nth degree what these filters are actually doing for you. So with the low key filter, we want to copy those control points. The first thing that we need to do is highlight the control points. To do that, you just basically click and hold shift. So I'm going to click on each control point, hold the shift key down while I'm clicking on each one. That just activates all of those control points. So now we can go into our filter, and there's a drop down in the on the right side of each individual filter, and we can copy the control points. And then we can go into our Glamour Glow filter, and we can paste our control points. Right, so now we have the same control points in low key as we do within Glamour Glow. We could do the same thing with darken, light, and center, but I don't think we're going to need to do that. In fact, I'm pretty happy with this result. Let's take a look at the before and after and just see what it's doing. So I moved into the upper left corner. We're looking at the side-by-side preview. I'm going to tap the Tab key on my keyboard. By the way, if you're interested in learning the shortcuts of the Nik Collection, you can go to the help portion of the Nik software website. I'll show you where that is at the end of the webinar. And there's a whole PDF that walks you through all of the different shortcuts. You don't have to use the shortcuts. It'll just help to speed you up as you get accustomed to using the software. So here we are. We've got our on the dark side recipe applied, and then we've gone in and sort of specifically adjusted it so that we get exactly what we want out of it. If you kind of lean back in your chair and you stare towards the center of your screen, or towards the center of this part of your screen anyways, where you're seeing my window, what you'll note is that your eye should kind of be attracted to the right side. At least if it's not now, it will be. Because what we're going to do next is actually add in another recipe. So we're going to add in the fur details recipe, but we're going to do it just on our bird, right? And here's the thing. If we loved what we had right now and we didn't want to do anything else to our image, we could just click the save button. We would be done. But in this case, let's selectively apply our fur details wildlife recipe here on top of the on the dark side recipe. Now, let's step back for just a second. If I just click on fur details, what's going to happen is the work that we've already done right now is going to disappear, right? And we don't want that to happen. I'll just show you that. So if I click on fur details and then I say, yes, go ahead and replace those other filters, all of the work that we just did disappears. But one nice thing to know about the software is that we can go back, we can undo. So just by tapping the Command Z key on my keyboard, I can go back that one state or one undo state and get our work back, basically. So if you ever make a mistake or you want to go back at any point, you can, of course, use the Command Z option. There's also a history state browser in the lower left corner, and you can bring that up and make adjustments to your history as well, kind of go back in time. It's a nice feature. We're going to keep moving, though. So I'm going to hold the Shift key down. The trick here to keep our recipe on the dark side that we've made our adjustments to, and to add on the fur details recipe, is to hold the Shift key down while we click on the other recipe. And what that does is it just adds the other recipe together, right? So now we have on the dark side and fur details applied to the image. I don't want the detail extractor filter and the tonal contrast filter that was applied with our recipe to be applied on the entire image. We only want it on the bird. So what we're going to do is go take plus control points. I'm going to start with the detail extractor. I'm going to take a plus control point. I'm going to put it on our bird. And basically that's just going to put in our detail extractor in wherever we've placed our points. Of course, we can make changes. So I could increase or decrease the detail extraction. I can increase or decrease the contrast. I don't think we need to make too many changes. I do want to make sure that we're really only getting the detail extractor and when we apply tonal contrast directly on the bird. To do that, we can of course just see what's happening by clicking this one filter on and off, but we can also get a sense of where our control points are placing our filter effect by moving into the control points section of the filter. Every filter has a control points section. You can open up into it and you can see exactly the opacity of the filter itself. And then you can see that is the global opacity. This is how much of the filter is being applied to the whole image. And then you have your control points. If you want to see where your control points are selecting, you actually click on this box, which is the show hide selection of control points. And this is going to give us a sense of where our filter is being applied and where it's not. In fact, I'm going to just take my opacity slider down to 0 because it's going to give us a higher contrast, a better representation of what the control points are doing. And now we're only applying our detail extractor wherever our control points are fully sort of engaged. And the places where it's fully on is wherever shows up in white in this mask. This is a sort of mask filter. So not a mask filter. It's a mask visual representation. So you can see anything that is white has the filter effect. Anything that's black, like over in the corners, has none of the effect. And then anything that's gray has some of that detail extractor effect. We're doing a pretty good job to put it on the bird. I want to make sure it's not on the background. So we're going to add another control point. We're going to click on the minus control point. We're just going to place a minus control point somewhere not on the bird, and that goes and cleans up our selection for us, right? And I can see that because depending upon where I place the point, we're going to get a different effect. And so I might place one control point here. I might take another minus control point and place it back here, and that's just going to hone in our selection even more. Now, a couple things are happening here. So for folks that are brand new to control points, the point is not making a circular selection. It's making a selection inside of the circle of the tone, color, and texture that you place the point on, right? And so if I take this plus control point and I just click on it and drag it away, you can see what happens, and you can see what this control point is going to apply the filter to based upon those tones, right? If I go place it on part of the stick here or the branch, you can see it's going to make its selection and apply the detail extractor to that part of the branch. Place it in the background, we're going to get the filter applied to the background. We don't want any of that. I'm just showing you kind of how these control points are working. And this should help to kind of figure out exactly where to put your points and how they're responding as you place the points on the image. The thing to think about with these control points is that they work differently than most kind of selective adjustments in sort of photo software. Usually in photography software, you have a brush, right? Whether it's an edge detection brush or it's a lasso tool or it's a quick select or anything like that. These are great digital tools. I would implore you to learn those if you're not familiar with those kinds of tools, let's say within Photolab or within Photoshop. But the control point is going to actually give you a photographic looking selection, and therefore the adjustment can look more photographic looking compared to, let's say, cutting something out, which is going to look more like you cut something out. You cut pixels, right? These control points do a good job to make these photographic looking selections, and therefore when you apply something like detail extractor or you remove something like the low key filter, it looks realistic. It looks pretty real, and you don't have to do much work to do it. Just kind of the beauty of it. Okay, so now with detail extractor, I want to apply the same adjustments to our tonal contrast filter. So we have to copy these control points again. We did that before with the low key filter, but what we're going to do is just kind of cover this one more time. Last time, to apply or to sort of turn on these control points, what I did is I held the shift key down and I clicked on each individual control point. We're going to do the same thing here. You hold shift, click on all the different control points, and then you're going to be able to move into the filter that you want to copy the points from. So the detail extractor filter. Click on copy control points. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to go into your next filter, the tonal contrast filter in this case, and we can paste our control points so that the filter is only being applied onto the bird in this case. Now, I think that the overall filter effect is too strong here. We could stay on this image and keep talking about making these adjustments, you know, for the next 15 minutes or 20 minutes, but I've got more images to show you. I just wanted to kind of go more in depth as to how to apply these recipes and how to control them that much more. Let's go ahead and just take a quick look at that before and after. So I've clicked on the side-by-side preview. I'm going to click the tab key or hit the tab key on my keyboard, and we'll have our original image on the left and our enhanced image on the right with our two wildlife recipes from the new version of the Nik Collection Color Efex Pro. Wonderful. All right, I'm happy with it. I hope you're happy with it. We're going to click the save button in the lower right corner. I'm going to let that save out. And then once Color Efex Pro 4 disappears, you're going to see Photolab is going to reappear because that's where we launched the software from. And we're going to have our original image. And then within the same, it's in the same folder, basically, you're going to have the enhanced image saved right next to it. All right, so let's go into our giraffe. Right, I want to show you how to save recipes. We've gone in depth now into how to sort of control the recipes and how to add extra recipes on top of our original recipes. Let's go through a little bit more of a normal process where maybe you only use one recipe and then you make some adjustments to it. So we're going to go to this photograph. I'm going to go ahead and just click on the Nik Color Efex software. All right, and Color Efex launches. Now, this is why I would suggest turning these warnings off, because every time I launch the software as a JPEG or a TIFF file from Photolab or from Lightroom, I get this prompt. Again, if you don't want it to turn on, you just click the Don't Show Again button, and then you know what this is saying. It's telling us that we can work in our non-destructive process by using the checkbox in the lower right corner of the interface. All right. Now, I launched the software, and it showed up in that side-by-side preview, right? And there are no tools or tool palettes on the interface right now because we kind of hid them. We tipped the tab button on the keyboard to get rid of them. The other way to open or close those are to use these buttons kind of manually in the upper left corner, so we can show or hide the recipes and or show or hide the tools palette on the right with the filters and the control points and so on. So you could actually work without even having that whole palette on the right side over if you just prefer to work with the recipes. I would say utilize these recipes as starting points. Let's say we go to the cool evening recipe and we click the yes button. Almost never, at least with my own photography, am I able to just click on the recipe and then I'm happy with the end result. I usually click on the recipe and then need to move over to that tools palette on the right side and make some changes. So let's do that. In fact, let's break down this filter one more time. The cool evening recipe that we've clicked on from our 25th anniversary, these new recipes, it starts with the Pro Contrast filter. And this is a really lovely corrective filter that will help us to optimize the color and the contrast of the photograph. So right now, the default settings from this recipe is to have the correct color cast on at 100%, correct contrast at 0, and dynamic contrast at 22%. Now, that isn't going to work for every image, but it's a good starting point to get the look that this recipe is after. So what we'll do is we'll start to massage those things. First of all, the correct color cast, this slider, individual slider, attempts to correct any color cast you might have on the image. And in this case, I don't think we really have much of a color cast, because I'm not seeing much of a shift in color as we make those adjustments. Now, the thing that I do want to point out is some images will be more dramatically affected by this slider, and also correct contrast and dynamic contrast, because this filter is, of course, going to be a dynamic filter. It's based upon the image that we've actually opened up. So as we make these changes, it's a good idea to kind of pay attention where those sliders are and kind of get a sense of, what does what as you slide those sliders around, because once you get used to using them, you'll get much faster once you recognize what each one of those sliders does. And the thing is I use this Pro Contrast filter all of the time. It's one of my favorite filters. We look at the before and after, we're really getting a lot of depth out of the image, and we're separating this giraffe off of that nice background just by adding in some contrast. If we wanted it to be a little lower contrast, we could, of course, drop that down. And in fact, I think for this image, it's not a bad idea, because we're going to go ahead and add this Glamour Glow filter effect. And that's going to give us a sort of softer overall feel. It's going to, in this case, desaturate the image a little bit because of the saturation setting. And then we can, of course, warm or cool the image. So Glamour Glow, darken, light, and center. By the way, if let's say you don't want darken, light, and center, or you don't want one of these filters to be applied on your image, you can just get rid of it by clicking the little X button on the far right side of that particular filter. So let's say we wanted to get rid of darken, light, and center. I click X, gets rid of it, and now we can move on to our duplex filter. Now, the duplex filter is going to apply this blue cool tone by default and based upon this particular recipe. You can, of course, change that by either clicking on the eyedropper tool and choosing a color from the image, or if you click on this little color swatch, you can actually decide what color you want using your color picker. This will look different whether you're on a Mac or on a PC, by the way. It'll be specific to whatever kind of system you're running on. And let's say instead of the blue purple tone that we had, let's turn it more of a green cyan color. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that into the color that I think I want. click X, and now we're going to be applying our duplex filter with this sort of high key, almost nuclear kind of green tone and color. If you don't like that, of course, you can go back in and make adjustments, right? So we can go and darken it back down a little bit, add a little bit more blue. This is probably very close to the original default, but you can make changes to your colors, again, with the eyedropper tool by selecting a particular color or using that color swatch and adding it in. Now, what we're going to do is start to make some adjustments here, and I want to show you how to really fine tune a highly transformative filter like duplex, right? The way to do this is to kind of massage the filters to what, or the sliders rather, that to the settings that you think you want. And then of course you can apply it using control points, and or if you click on the word control points, you can also control the overall strength of this filter with the opacity slider. If you take this opacity slider from 100%, you bring it down to 0, we're not applying any of the duplex filter. If I start to drag this up, we can apply some or a lot based upon what we're after with the look and feel of our image. So at this point, I think I like about a 37%, 36% opacity. This is really bringing down the strength of this filter quite a lot. And now we have this kind of cool, toned feel. I think I want to darken the image overall, but before we do that, I say we add in, let's just add in 2 filters. We're gonna make a kind of postcard looking aesthetic, I think, in this case, whatever that means. It's gonna be something that it sort of reminds me of a postcard anyway. So let's click the add filter button, right? We've finished with the 3 filters that this preset / recipe applies. We're gonna click on the add filter button. As I do that, it buttons up our 3 filters and it opens up our filter library, where here we're going to choose the new filter that we want to utilize. And I'm going to click on Film Effects Modern. So this filter, as I click on it, emulates kind of contemporary and some old film stocks, right? So what you do to use this filter is you just click on the drop down and you choose the particular film type that you like, right? And based upon the film type, you're going to get a completely different overall look and feel. In fact, so if we leave it on Ektachrome 64 here, and then I scroll down to Elite Chrome or into Kodak Gold, you're going to notice a pretty dramatic difference and change based upon those different film types, right? And what we're doing here is we're emulating these different film types as if this image had been shot with that particular film. We're going to run with Kodak Ultra Color 100 UC. It's a nice film stock. Of course, we can adjust the brightness. We can brighten or dark, well, we can brighten the image. We can add contrast to the image with these 2 sliders. But this particular filter also has the specific film details sliders. So this goes really in depth. And this is what I'm trying to get to a little bit. For folks who are maybe brand new to Color Efex Pro 4, you can use the recipes. Just click on it, make some little adjustments to the sliders, and oftentimes you're going to get exactly what you want out of the image, right? By just doing a little bit of work. But the beauty of this tool is that you can grow with it. You can click on that recipe as we've done. We can add to the recipe, and then we can go into these filters that give us so much control over what's happening in the image, and we can go in and affect how dark or how bright particular colors render with this particular filter. Or in this case, I want to increase saturation overall. So I'm going to bring in my saturation sliders and I'm just going to bump them up a bit. Now, one thing to note is that we could have actually just chosen a filter that has a saturation slider, right? Like an overall saturation slider, and we could have just bumped up the saturation. But in this case, why not just go in and adjust each individual one? Right? I know that the zebra is primarily red and yellow. So if I bring the red and the yellow up a lot, that's going to be, it's going to stand out more. We're going to get more color in those areas with the red and yellow. So therefore, we're going to get more color popping out of the giraffe's body and the mane of the giraffe there. So now we're getting a little bit more color separation because we can specifically adjust each one of those. We don't have to do it. It's just in this case, it's a really great tool, and it allows us that much more control. Now, to finish off this image, we're going to click the Add Filter button. I'm going to add the image borders filter. And the reason I'm doing this is that it kind of creates this nice finished effect. And I want to kind of save our recipe here, and we're going to call it a postcard recipe, right? So we will be utilizing a recipe that was just designed and implemented into the Color Efex software, and we're going to save our own custom recipe that does something pretty different, although it's based upon that original recipe that we used. So I've adjusted the image border filter. Definitely play with this tool. I love using image borders on type number 1, especially as the holiday season is approaching. And I have access to a printer right now, so I'll be printing lots of images for holiday purposes, for gifts. And one way to reduce the cost of framing things is to offer whoever you're giving the gift to, if you're not able to frame it for them, whoever you're giving the gift to, different options. Right? And so one of the things that I'll do is I'll print the image at a standard ratio / size, but I'll float it onto a larger piece of paper, right? So the image is kind of floating on a large piece of paper. And what that does is it allows me, with this kind of edge, to let people frame the image without having to mat it or double mat it or anything like that. Or if they want to, they can. But if you look at this corner, the image border corner that we just added, it kind of creates this organic looking rounded edge where the image kind of just ends, right? It's not the 90-degree edge. If we turn image borders off, you see the image goes right to the edge, which works. But if we click on image borders, now we have this sort of other style of the edge. And again, what it tends to help to do, at least whenever I'm printing images, is it offers people another or a different way of presenting it, of doing the photo finishing, the framing of the image. They can frame it or mat it right up to the edge, or if they don't want to, they don't have to. They can float it right on a piece of paper. Long story short, I like this new recipe that we've created. Let's save the recipe by clicking the Save Recipe button underneath our filter stack on the right side of the interface. So I'll click Save Recipe, and then we're going to call this one Postcard. Click OK, and this custom recipe is going to be saved into our recipes portion of the interface, specifically into the custom section. I'll show you where that is. So here is our postcard recipe that we've just created. Voila, it's beautiful, it's there. And if you go looking for it, like let's say you were in the 25th anniversary section, right? Because we had just clicked on that recipe before, or you want to be able to kind of navigate the interface a little bit better. The 25th anniversary recipes sit inside of the all sort of recipes section here. So the recipe that we just created, that is the postcard recipe, is inside of my own custom recipes. So anytime you make your own, you're going to be able to find them there in the custom section. And these are all just random recipes that I've created for different purposes. Anyways, we've applied our postcard filters. Sorry, we've applied our recipe from the 25th anniversary brand new recipes that were built into the software. We've made some adjustments to it. We've saved it as our own thing, and we've kind of transformed it into a completely different thing. And what we're going to do is click the Save button. And I actually have one more image that I want to show you. We're going to jump over into Photoshop in this case, though, because the feature set that I want to show you uses layers and layer masks. And I'm going to do this one quickly so that we can move into our Q&A. All right, so we're here in Photoshop now. I'm accessing the Nik plugins from this Nik Selective tool. And it's just a different way of accessing the software. There are two ways of doing it from Photoshop. You can use the Nik Selective tool, or you could go to the Filter drop-down menu and then down to the Nik Collection, and you can find your Nik Collection there. We're going to go ahead and click right on Color Efex Pro 4. We're going to apply a recipe to the image, and then I'm going to paint the effect in, right? So let's go into the 25th anniversary, because we're going to utilize as many of those as possible today. And we're going to use Sunny Day. So we'll click on Sunny Day. We'll say, yes, no problem. We don't mind applying these filters. And then rather than clicking the OK button, which while we were accessing the software from Photolab, or if you're a Lightroom user, the button says Save. In the Photoshop version of the software where we just launched, this is one of the differences between the Photoshop version and the other versions of the Nik Collection. If you click the OK button, it's going to apply this adjustment on a layer, as Photoshop will. If we click the brush button, this is another one of the differences between the Nik version of Photoshop and the Nik versions within Photolab and Lightroom. If we click the brush button, it actually allows us to paint the effect in. So I should be using a Wacom tablet or a pen tablet to paint the effect exactly where we want it to be. I'm not going to do that here because I'm on my laptop and I don't have my Wacom tablet plugged in. But basically what we're going to be able to do is use the Nik selective tool to paint the effect in. We can erase the effect using the erase button. We could fill our filter. So that's going to basically fill our layer mask. Or we can clear the whole thing by clicking the little trash can. By the way, if you're a Photoshop user or you want to get into using Photoshop, learn a couple things. Learn about layers, layer masks, and blending modes. Those three things, there's thousands of other things to learn in there. But if you get to know those three things, layers, layer masks, and blending modes, you'll be able to do all sorts of great and powerful stuff within Photoshop. And that's what this tool is utilizing. It's basically allowing us to use what's called a layer mask in Photoshop and paint our filter effect in. And in fact, what we're going to do here is I'm going to paint the filtered effect into a couple different areas on the image. I've got to enlarge the size of my brush so that I can paint it in a soft, sort of smooth way. And what we're going to do is kind of create this ray of light that comes down through. And as you get to know how the layers and the layer masks work, this is going to allow you to do all sorts of different stuff like this, applying, maybe a ray of light kind of poking through very quickly. And if we got more specific as to how this ray of light was working, or even used a gradient tool or some of the other tools, we would be able to get some different effects out of this as well. So when we're done painting the effect in, we click the apply button, and voila. I'm going to open my layers back up. And actually, I don't have my layers here, but we basically have our painted effect in exactly where we wanted it to be. Anyways, it's 1:52. I just wanted to show you that last trick like that. And we're going to transition into a Q&A. So I'm going to try and get through as many questions as we can. And I just need to find the right place to start. So I'm going to scroll back up through our questions. We've got a bunch of them. And the first question here from Joey that I'm seeing is, why does the image look out of focus? Joey, I'm not sure which image you were talking about because there's no timestamp on this, so I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that. Now, Benoit, you said, when I already have a TIFF file, should I open a second one to begin Nik processing? Benoit, see, I'm going to need a little bit more feedback on that one because it depends on what you're after. So if you're in Photolab and you already have a TIFF file, you can use that original TIFF file so that you have your raw and a TIFF. Or if you want to work in sort of the fully non-destructive process, you would make copies of the TIFF file so that you could always go back one step if you wanted to. The webinar was recorded and you will be able to find it right here, actually. Let's jump over. So this might be where you find the webinars. I don't know where you found the webinar when you logged in initially or when you found out about it, but if you go to nikcollection.DxO.com and you click on the Explore tab, so you go to the main website, you click on Explore, click on Webinars, and it's going to show you the currently posted webinars that are going to go live on a particular day, like right now, our this webinar that we're in right now, and it's live. And then you'll also be able to find a whole bunch of recorded webinars. And then you can decide which piece of software you want to learn about as well. So if you want to see all of the recorded webinars, you can click on the All tab, or you can kind of navigate through different pieces of software based upon what you want to learn about. All right. Great question, Gregory. Thank you. Does Control Z work within the Nik plugins? Yes, it does. Control Z is to undo a step, and it totally does work if you need to go back in a history state. Are all of these recipes different than Lightroom presets? That's a difficult question. So all of the recipes that we had within Color Efex are applying filters that are specific to Color Efex Pro and that don't exist within Lightroom. So it's a completely different interface, and you'd use the software, in a different capacity with these recipes than if you were to use a Lightroom preset on a raw file. Javier, yes. So the question is, does the save and edit option work in Photoshop? So the non-destructive process that we were talking about within the Photolab and the Lightroom version of the software, where that prompt pops up, that is not available within the Photoshop version of the software. Technically, though, in Photoshop, you can use what's called a smart object, and the smart object is going to give you the ability to go back in and re-edit. So you'd apply the Nik plugins as a smart filter. The way you do that, though, is you turn your layer, your image in Photoshop, into a smart object before you go into the Nik control or Nik software. How do you adjust the size of the control points? Let's minimize this. Let's just go back over into, oops. I'm going to go back a couple steps here. There we go. And we'll open back up into Color Efex. So how do you adjust the size of the control points? When you place a control point on the image, you have the ability to click on the control point and drag it around. And then you also have the ability to change the opacity and the size of the control point. So if you want to control the size of the area that the control point is selecting, you click on the slider that's basically parallel with the control point itself, and you can drag it away. It's going to make a larger selection, or you can drag it towards the control point itself. It's going to make a smaller selection. Yes. Okay, so Bob asked the question, would you please repeat how to add one recipe to another? Yes. So let's click here. Hi, Bob, by the way. We need to chat, I think. I wonder if you're still here. So let's say we apply sunny day. I've got to just say, yep, that's fine. So it gets annoying to leave these prompts up, but again, I do it so that we, you guys see everything that you would see in your own version. So I've clicked on sunny day, and the question is, how do you add another recipe on top of your recipe? And what you'll do is you hold the Shift key down on your keyboard, and then just click on the other recipe that you want. So if I go and click on fur details, we're going to keep sunny day, which has the skylight filter, pastel filter, and white neutralizer, but it will also add the detail extractor and the tonal contrast, right? Okay, cool. Good question, Bob. Thanks for asking that one. So John, you said if you move your photo from Lightroom into Photolab made some adjustments, and then moved into the Nik Collection, made adjustments. When complete, the photo will be sent back to Photolab, and then, oh man. John, that's a good question. That's a hard one. So John's question is in regards to overall workflow, and it's in regards to using Lightroom CC and then moving an image into Photolab and then moving the image from Photolab into Nik. I wouldn't recommend that. I would say, John, if you wanted to use Color Efex Pro 4 and you're a Lightroom user, launch into Color Efex Pro 4 from Lightroom. We didn't talk about that today, but to do that, John, what you would do is while in the develop module in Lightroom, you right click on your image, and then an edit in prompt. So actually a large prompt will come up. You would click on edit in, and then you'll see the Nik Collection pop into that area, and you would just click on Color Efex Pro. And you'd have the same capabilities as if you were to launch from Photolab. But I wouldn't suggest moving an image from Lightroom to Photolab, then from Photolab to the Nik Collection. It wouldn't be helpful, and it would just end up taking way longer than it needed to. How do you get the wildlife recipes? Yeah, so you'd have to have the most recent version of the Nik Collection. So if you don't have the most recent version, you'd update to that most recent version. Or if you have, let's say you have the original Google version of the Nik Collection, or you're way back and somehow you still have the Nik software privately owned original Nik Collection, you'd have to upgrade to the Nik Collection 3.3. Sometime before 2022, will you tell us how to remove a control point? Yeah, Stan, I'm sorry, I'm just seeing that question. So the thing is, like, when I'm doing these webinars, usually we would have Lori Rubin here also helping, which, by the way, all of these images are Lori's. I used all of Lori's photographs for this presentation. Usually she would have been able to answer that question. If you want to get rid of a control point, you don't need it on there anymore. You just click on it and tap the delete key on your keyboard. It'll get rid of it. So Elizabeth asks, if you close a filter in one of the recipe sets, does it stay closed for just that image or stay closed perpetually? Good question, Elizabeth. So if you make adjustments or if you close a filter, get rid of the filter from the recipe, it is only applied to the image that you're currently on. It only adjusts to the image. So it's not permanent. If you wanted to make an adjustment that was permanent, you'd save your own version. So you would basically, like let's say we liked what we did here with tonal contrast, skylight, all of these filters, you would save the recipe as your own new custom recipe. Vincent, I'm not sure your question there. Image border is heating the picture, not possible as Photolab to keep the full-size picture and adding a frame. I'm not sure the question, I'm sorry. When you save the postcard recipe, did it save color adjustments or just the frame? Good question. So when we saved that custom recipe, it saved every single thing that we did. So if I move back over into our postcard recipe and I click on it, we're going to get the exact same set of filters and adjustments applied as we did when we created the recipe. I kind of like what's happening here, except the whole thing is a little bit too dark, so we'd probably want to go in and make some adjustments to the density. All right, Marion, you said you understand use Photoshop to access, but I don't have to struggle with Photoshop to get the effects. Correct. So everything that we did today, we launched from Photolab, and you could have an identical workflow if you were a Lightroom user. You would just launch the software from Lightroom and do all of the same stuff that we did. The last trick that I kind of sped through and showed you was using layer masks in Photoshop. And what it did is it allowed us to paint the filter effect in where we wanted it to be. In that way, you're able to combine tools that are within Photoshop with the powerful tools that are within the Nik Collection, in our case, Color Efex Pro 4, and marry those things together, right? Daisy, you said you're a heavy Lightroom user. What would benefit for me to use Photolab? Okay, so Photolab is basically an equivalent to Lightroom, right? It is a raw processing, fully featured tools set for photographers. It has an organizational aspect to it. It has post-processing. It allows you to control and adjust metadata. You can put watermarks on the image and so on and so forth. So Daisy, if you're a heavy Lightroom user, you love your workflow, you might not use Photolab. You might just plug in and use the Nik Collection with Color Efex and Viveza and so on and so forth. I was launching from Photolab because it's part of my own process. So I will typically use Photolab for the raw processing and then go into the Nik Collection from there. Or the other thing that I will do is I will use the Photolab for my raw processing, and then I'll take the image over into Photoshop so that I have layers and layer masks and blending modes and so on and so forth. Make my adjustments within the Nik Collection using the Photoshop layers, then save the file and it shows back up over in Photolab. Let's see. I'm still trying to run through and see these questions. So thank you for sticking around. We've still got about 350 people here. I definitely appreciate you sticking around. And Renee, thank you. If you're still here, I appreciate your kind words. So Renee's been coming to the webinars since the past 12 years, basically. I started in 2009, and I've only a few years where I wasn't giving webinars for Nik software. So I worked for Nik software from 2009 to 2014, and then started giving webinars again around 2017. So Renee, thank you for your kind words. So Rafal, you said once the changes are saved in Color Efex and the picture is reopened in Photolab, is it possible to track back what changes were applied within Color Efex? Yes. If you use that option you turn on that little checkbox in the lower right corner, you can go back in, Rafal, and you can re-edit the image. It's one of the new features within the newer versions of the Nik Collection when launching from Photolab or launching from Photolab or from Lightroom. If you turn on this checkbox that's in the lower right corner, I'm going to show you once it launches, you can go back in and re-edit the image. You can kind of track back or reprocess. So this is what it's telling us. If you're using a TIFF file, since we've imported it as a TIFF file, we have the ability to resume editing later. To turn on that feature, you have to click this checkbox, save and edit later. And the reason you have to turn it on, and it's not on by default, is because it does generate a slightly larger TIFF file, right? And so because of that, Nik is giving you the option to not do it if you don't want to. So you have to turn that checkbox on, and Rafael, that's how you can do the re-edit the image. Richard, so you said super presentation. Oh, cool. Thank you. So George says, where's the PDF you referred to? Thank you for the reminder. I greatly appreciate that. If we jump over into Chrome again, I'll show you where you can get a PDF with all the shortcuts, as well as a lot more information about the Nik Collection in its totality in written form. So it's different than watching a video. It's a lot of folks prefer it written. I do like reading certain things as opposed to watching them sometimes. So what you'll do, George, is you go to this link, but what you'll do if you go to the webinars page is you go to customer support, and then the whole help portion of the website pops up. And I've got to minimize my GoToWebinar screen. Here's where we can get our documentation. I'm going to try and find that PDF for you. So we just need to go to the Color Efex, and there's a shortcut, I promise, somewhere. Color Efex Tour, filters, applying filters, adding multiple filters. Somewhere on this page, there's a shortcuts PDF and walkthrough. I want to say it's specifically somewhere in here. And I'm going to get back to more questions, by the way. So if you stick around, I'll try and answer more of them. Peter said the borders filter in Silver Efex are the best ever. How can I have them in Color Efex and Viveza? Okay, Peter, good question. So the image borders that you have within Silver Efex are also a filter within Color Efex Pro. So you would find it by going into your filter library. It's called image borders, and here we are. It's the same as the tool that's within Silver Efex. So you have access to all of those same borders, which are really handy as well. Can you tell which control points are plus and which are minus when they're on the image? The only way to be able to tell the difference between a plus and a minus control point, let's add a different filter. Let's say Film Effects Vintage. Let's change the film filter type. There we go. And then, so the way to tell a difference between a plus or minus control point is when you click on it, it has a little arm, right? The one that says O, it's Michelle. So the plus control point, that little arm, the opacity slider is set all the way out. It's 100. On a minus control point, it's small. It's all the way to the left or close to the letter O. And that's really the only way to be able to tell the difference, because really a plus and a minus control point are kind of the same thing. They just have a different opacity default setting. And that's why they look exactly the same, because technically they are the same, it's just they have different default settings. John, I'm running the Nik version 3.3. Where are the new recipes? You should be able to find the new recipes in the recipe section if you're running 3.3, the newest version of the plugin. Is there an option to save out to Photoshop as a stamp or active layer? Yes, so Rod, generally, so I'm going to click OK or save here. Generally, when you're using Photoshop, what I did was I clicked the brush button. If you just click the OK button, it saves, it merge stamp visible and gives you an active layer. How can you enlarge the text in the Nik software in Photoshop? Normal, that's an interface thing. I'm not sure. I don't know if you can. I think Normal, the only way to enlarge typefaces within like the Nik collection is to change the resolution of the screen, the resolution setting of your screen within your system preferences, which would change the resolution of every piece of software you're using. So note that. Thank you guys for sticking around. Do custom recipes save control points as well? Michelle, they can. So that's actually another, excuse me, another trick. So yeah, the thing is about a lot of these things, there's generally a way to do something or a workaround, right? So this question was, can you save control points into a recipe? Yes, technically you can. There are a lot of situations, in fact, most situations where you're going to use recipes and you don't want control points to be in there. And that's why the default doesn't save control points. But a lot of times, or maybe sometimes you do want control points to be saved in there. And to do that, I'm going to show you right now, I'm going to just place some control points. So I'm placing some minus control points in the Film Effects Modern filter. And if I save a new recipe, and while I click the save button, I hold the shift button down. This is the trick. You have to hold the shift button down when you save your recipe, and it will also save your control points. It seems crazy, but it will work. So I'm going to say postcard 2, and I'm actually still holding the shift button. I probably don't need to, but I'm going to hold it down the whole time. And let's make sure that worked. So I'm going to click on Cool Blue Night. It's going to replace our filter stack, and then I'm going to go back to postcard 2, and it will replace the filter stack again. And I hope, anyways, in the image borders, yeah, we've got our control points saved. The trick is to hold the shift button down when you click the save recipe button. And that's a weird one, but it's in there, so it's kind of nice. Marion, very cool. First time you've ever heard of Photolab. Carl just mentions Photolab is much better than Lightroom, period. Okay, yeah, Carl, I don't want to get into any arguments anywhere, but I do like Photolab 4 quite a bit. I teach Lightroom. I teach photography at RIT, the Rochester Institute of Technology. And in our curriculum, we teach the Adobe products because of how common they are within industry. And so we teach Lightroom, and I use Lightroom as well. But for my personal work, I tend to use Photolab with raw processing. And that's just me, you know. Glenn, you said, with the latest version of the Nik Collection, are you supposed to be able to go back and re-edit a given filter if the checkbox is selected? You can't figure out how to do that. Reopening the file always results in sliders at 0. Okay. All right, I think this might be our last question because my throat's starting to hurt and we're about 15 minutes over. But the question, let's click cancel, is how to use that, how to use the non-destructive processing option that you can use from Lightroom. And what we're gonna do here, so I actually have the checkbox on with this image. Let's see if we can do this twice. So if you stick around with me, I'll try and teach you how to do this one. I don't use this feature very often because I usually use the Photoshop stuff. But I had the checkbox on within the interface, which means now when I go to the Nik Collection, I have to do one thing here before I click on Color Efex Pro, and this is probably what you're missing, the reason why it's not working for you. You have to go into the settings, and we want to export the selective TIFF without processing. So this is the key to re-editing the image within Photolab. So you click on this button, and then you click OK, and now when you click on Color Efex, your non-destructive process, it should open up and we should be able to make adjustments now. Right? Yeah, there are my control points. So let's say we go in and we change our filter effect and we add in darken light and center, which seems crazy because of the vignetting on the other image, but then we click save. So note, this checkbox is on, save and edit later, click save, and it updates the image, right? And we'll do it one more time. In fact, let's do it on a different picture as if we hadn't done it before. So we'll go to this image, we'll go to the Nik Collection. The first time, because we're editing a raw file, it's gonna make us edit a copy, or we're gonna want to edit a copy. So we're going to want to make sure that when we go into the Nik collection the first time, you have it export as a TIFF file, and I would recommend a 16-bit per channel TIFF file. Click OK. Click into Color Efex. So I think that's the hurdle or the stumbling block that you might be running into and why that's not working. Yep. All right. So let's click on a recipe. I'm going to go into my own custom recipes. Let's click on the dust project. And then I'm going to add some control points. Oops. And then click the Save button because this checkbox is on, Save and Edit Later. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I know I wasn't able to get to every single question. I'm sorry. We could stay here all day and keep talking, but my throat's starting to hurt, and I actually have a 2:30 meeting that I need to make it off to. So I hope that this has been beneficial to you. I am going to open this back up and show you this one more time, but as that was saving, I kind of wanted to just give you an update. All right, so we want to reprocess this image, right? We want to open it up and make adjustments to wherever we left control points, or maybe add or adjust filters. What you would do is click on it here in the film strip there, click on Nik Collection. Because we're reprocessing the image, you have to make sure to click the Settings button. It's a little bit of an added step. Click on the Export Selected Files Without Processing. Click OK. And now that image, that TIFF file is going to launch back into the Nik collection, and we should be able to make some adjustments. Hopefully. Oop, I think I opened it twice. There we go. Cross-processing bleach bypass. And it's all there. Cool. All right. Hopefully that's helpful. So again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. I have a lot more questions. I'm sorry that I'm not able to make it through. Ron, really quickly, you can install on 2 computers. So if you own 1 copy of the software, you can install it on two of your computers, a laptop and a desktop, or laptop and a laptop, or 2 desktops, or whatever you want, but 2 computers technically. All right, have an absolutely fantastic day, ladies and gentlemen. Again, thank you for joining. I apologize I wasn't able to get to every single question. If you come back on the 14th, I believe Lori will be joining me, and she'll be able to answer questions while we're in the webinar, and that is much more efficient, and then she just saves a couple questions for the end. But have a fantastic day. Enjoy your software. Come back and see us again soon, and thanks a lot. Bye-bye.